Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll get started here with the Fretboard Journal Vintage Instrument Workshop. It's our pleasure today to have four great artists coming to you. Tim O'Brien, Eli West, Nina Gerber, and Chris Eldridge. Eli and Chris have done this before. I think Tim and Nina have not, but Jason and I were talking about 12 or 13 years ago and thought, Wintergrass is such a great event, and with all these cool old vintage instruments walking around, gee, why don't we try and get the Wintergrass folks to put together a workshop where we can have some artists play them. And after pestering Rufo and a couple of guys for a few years, we got it put together. So here we are now, 2013, the first time we did it with Dave Grisman and Kenny Smith. Grisman's Tone Poems album was a big inspiration for a lot of us and taught us something about all the old instruments. And we have a good time doing this every year. Really thanks to Wintergrass, thanks to the Fretboard Journal, and thanks to all of you guys for coming and supporting Wintergrass. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We couldn't do this without all of you guys. And thanks to all these artists for coming. We really appreciate their time. We have, to start off with, we've made a tradition the last few years of having the artists play one song that we request, and the rest of them they can pick their set list as they go. And that's Hard Times Come Again No More, Stephen Foster's tune that was first published in 1852. His publishing house was a company called Firth and Pond. They also sold a lot of musical instruments and were really the big distributor of the 1800s. One of the musical instrument line that they sold was a guy named James Ashbourne in Wolcott, Connecticut, made guitars. One of them we have here, the Ashbourne, is from 1848, so it was sold by the same company that first published Stephen Foster's Hard Times Come Again No More. We have, that's the one, who has the Ashbourne? Eli has the Ashbourne here. We have also an 1888 Washburn Style 103, which was owned by a woman named Kitty Ramey. She was a music teacher in Salina, Colorado for many years. It was in their family for 130 years. And let me get that, it's right here. Right here. So a lot of music was taught and played forward on that old Washburn. These are really small little parlor guitars. It was kind of, people played music in the parlors and they wanted to start to get more volume out of them, and we got bigger bodies as the year went by. But they're surprisingly loud and full of tone when you play them, especially in a room. Hopefully some of that comes through in the mic. They're really great sounding guitars, all of them. Nina and Chris have the Martins, one from 1870. I think it's a 218, rosewood sides and back, and Chris is playing the 1885. Is that right, Chuck? 1885, 028. So Martin was still making fairly small body guitars as well. So all of these are now before turn of the century. The Ashbourne is pre-war, pre-Civil War. So we're going to see what those guys sound like on Stephen Foster's Hard Times Come Again No More.
All right. There goes absolutely nothing. Key of D. Sure. First mistake of the day. Getting it out of the way. They don't have fret markers on these old guitars. Side dots. There's no money above the 5th fret. Sing along if you like. Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many fears, as we all sup sorrow with the poor, There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Somebody want to play it? While we seek mirth and beauty and music light and gay, there are frail forms fading at the door. Though their voices are silent, their pleading looks will say, oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Lady left. Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Yeah, packs a lot of punch.
Probably guitar. Good gig. Nobody else is playing that.
Never had a guitar tech like that.
This is like a really expensive white elephant gift party. We get to keep these, right, Mark?
Everybody says that, Eli.
It's a lot like speed dating, I think.
Okay, next, as the 1890s into the 1920s, music, we had as we talk about every year, our society really has these fads, and our culture picks up on different styles of music as the years go by. And mandolin orchestras were the huge rage through that whole time period. We have we're going to try and do a bit of a mandolin orchestra replication here with a mandola, a couple of mandolins, and a couple of guitars that really started with mandolin orchestras. Tim's playing a 1909 Gibson H1 mandola. Eli's playing the 1907 A Gibson A mandolin. Chris has the 1907 Gibson L1, and Nina's playing a 1909 Lion Healy Lakeside Jumbo. When they started doing the mandolin orchestras, as you can imagine, the guitar started getting lost in the volume. So they tried to do something to get a little more volume going. And one of the big musical distributors in that time was a company called Lion and Healy. They were the biggest instrument distributor in the world. And they sold a lot of even of other brands and stuff, but they made a number of instruments. And they started, really the first cataloged steel string large body guitar, some people call it the first dreadnought, is the 1909 Lakeside Jumbo, was in the catalogs there. It's got a pretty huge sound, and their idea was to try and get some volume out through that cut over the mandolins. The mandolin orchestras kind of started dying out in the 20s. We'll talk about that next in our next set, but for now, if you were a 19-teens mandolin orchestra, this is some of what you'd look like. We're going to let you guys pick whatever song you want now. The Lakeside Jumbo we have here every year because it's kind of a first, but Nina can hold up the back and show you what looks like beautiful rosewood, but as some of you already know, it's painted grain. They had these artisans that painted grain on wood. It's really a birch back and sides, and it looks for all the world like Brazilian rosewood, but sounds good though. It's a nice guitar. So mandolin orchestras, 19-teens.
Well, I'll tip my hat to Mike because I know you do this one too. Well, I told the daffodil, I told the whippoorwill just how pretty your smile. Yes, I told him all about you. I told the little bird every single word that you say was worthwhile. Yes, I told him all about you. I told the moon and all the pretty stars that shine above about the way you roll your pretty eyes and how you love. Each little honeybee knows there's gonna be a honeymoon for two. Yes, I told him all about you. I told the whippoorwill just how pretty your smile. Yes, I told all about you. I told the little bird every single word that you say was worthwhile. Yes, I told all about you. I told the moon and all the pretty stars that shine above about the way you roll your pretty eyes and how you love. Each little honeybee knows there's gonna be a honeymoon for two. Yes, I told all about you. above, about the way you roll your pretty eyes and how you love. Each little honeybee knows there's gonna be a honeymoon for two. Yes, I told her all about you.
Beautiful.
Which one of you guys wants to play the mandola? This is a lower set, all the way lowers. Anybody care?
Well, I'll get it. I'm getting used to the mandola now.
I had a friend that used to collect instruments to sell them, buy and sell. Rick Ryman, he's still around in Denver, I believe, and he told his dad that he scored a Lloyd Loar mandola, and his dad said, "Oh, great! That's the least. That's the most important instrument after the mandolin, the mandocello, and the mando bass." What should we play now?
Okay, so the mandolin orchestras were still going pretty good in the 20s, but starting to die off a little bit. And Gibson made most of the instruments that you've seen up here. And they had a guy, acoustic engineer named Lloyd Loar, who worked there from the 20s through Christmas time of 24. And he's kind of the Lloyd Loar signed mandolins from Gibson are kind of the Stradivarius of the mandolin family. He signed, I think, 250 or so mandolins. The mandolas, I think there's 24 known signed Loar mandolas. And then he basically, they used violin techniques as their guide and made really refined designs and made the very best possible sounding instruments they could. Mostly classical music played in those days in the orchestras. So the mandola was like the viola, mandolin like the violin. They had a mandocello, and then the guitar that Nina has is an L5, and I think they called it a KM5 that was the mandocello. Not very many, though. I think there's only 4 or 5 or 6 of the mandocellos. But so Lord would sign the label that he'd inspected it, and it was all up to top notch. They tried to make those really fine-sounding instruments right about the time that the mandolin craze was dying off. People started playing banjos more, if you can believe that. So they kind of sat there and didn't get used for many years till Bill Monroe found his Loar in a barbershop in Florida in 1946 or thereabouts. So we're going to try a Loar set here. He signed some of the L5 guitars like Nina has, and then, of course, the mandocellos. This one is from 1925, so right after Loar left. But we think maybe it was still worked on, certainly, by the Loar folks. So this is a pretty rare Loar set. And then Jonty's going to play the Gibson Mando bass. This was the next in the level of importance beyond the mandola. So we're going to try that. There's not many of these out there, but again, it was Gibson's attempt to get the whole orchestra out there. So a Lloyd Loar set, don't get to see this very often. Let me have, where's Emily? And you want to come up here for 1 second and talk about, and Daniel too, talk about the Dewey Loar and the Jurassic Loar. I'll just hand the mic to you. These guys came to share their Loar mandolins with us from Colorado and Pennsylvania. Came out to the festival just to help share their instruments. So I'm going to let them talk for just a minute. You can come around.
Hi, I'm Emily Wilson, and my mandolin, well, it's not actually mine. It belonged to a teacher of mine named Eli West. And he was a classical mandolin player in Denver, and actually him and Tim used to play together from time to time. And its current situation is that Eli passed away in 2015. He would have been 100 in April of this year. And he bought the mandolin in 1936. And so currently what's going on with it is we're trying to transfer the ownership to me, but it's a large chunk of money. So what we're doing is the Colorado Symphony has helped me form an LLC that's actively seeking investors for a 10-year period. And yeah, it was kind of his baby and this cool mandolin.
Hi, I'm Daniel Ullum, and kind of like Emily being a curator of a mandolin, I just became the new curator of the Dewey Murphy lore. Dewey Murphy was a bluegrass musician from North Carolina, kind of a Bill Monroe type figure, and he played that mandolin for over 50 years. It's a February 18th, 1924 mandolin, and Dewey got it in 1962 and just played the crap out of it, and so it's had a major restoration done to it, but it's a bluegrass mandolin if I ever heard one, so excited to hear people play it today.
And thanks again, you guys, for coming and sharing those instruments with us. Again, kind of the Lloyd Loar instruments are the Stradivarius of the family, so we'll like to hear them play.
Start it.
Thank
tune guitar?
Time to. Nope. Yeah, me too.
Actually,
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again to Emily and Daniel for bringing their F5 mandolins out. And Martin Stillion for bringing out the Gibson mandolin bass. That's pretty cool. Most of the instruments you've seen so far were the traditional material for all of these instruments for back and sides is maple, mahogany, and rosewood. That's kind of the traditional materials. At the turn of the century, there's a lot of oak guitars made as well, which sound really good. Most of the tops were made out of spruce, and in those early days, what most of the catalogs call eastern spruce, commonly called Adirondack spruce, because then the early stands of it were from northeastern New York State in the Adirondack region. They did a lot of, they logged it all off and ran out of that wood, started moving into Vermont and then down into West Virginia as the stands were kind of decimated. So they started learning early on that, you know, some of this wood was going to disappear. But in those days, you just kept moving on to where the trees were growing. When they logged those off, there was really, it was quite an adventure to get those logs down in the Adirondack region, especially. They floated them down the rivers. One of the rivers was the Sagamdauga River, and had these guys had these big log jams and floated them down to the mills. And most of it was meant for building materials, 2x4s and stuff. The really select ones made for tops. Tim has a song called River Driving, which tells the story of some of those loggers cutting the spruce in the early days that went into many of these guitars. For our selection here today, we have, in the transition years of 1930, 31, and 3, Martin was going from, historically they did 12-fret guitars, so they had some were short and long scale, but basically that same scale, but with a 12-fret neck. As the banjo craze started dying out in the late 20s, they wanted some of the banjo players moved to guitar, and they wanted a longer neck for a longer scale. So they came along with the 14-fret neck and changed the design of things. And then from there, the dreadnought came out in both 12 and 14 frets. So these are 1930, 31, and 33 OM 28, OM 18, so rosewood and then mahogany sides and back, and a triple O 18 and a triple O 28 from 1930 and 34. So all made by Martin. So Brazilian rosewood sides and back, mahogany sides and back, all would have red spruce or Adirondack spruce tops in these.
Here's my new You know, you go. Great.
it's got the 3 minor and 6 minor, and you know, a little doohickey in between.
Come on, how good is that? You just don't get a chance to hear on these guitars with these artists. Thanks. Where but Wintergrass, can you hear that? And if not the Fretboard Journal, then who would put all this together? So thanks, Jason, for all your support over the years. A lot of people to thank for this, by the way. Demaray sends us new strings every year. There's a bunch of stickers up here and some picks that they said you guys can pick up for your cases if you want. We're playing their new X series of strings on all of these. It's a big job to get them all strung up. And everybody that comes really helps put all this together. Thanks again to these artists we got a long ways to go, but I want you to really appreciate how they step up and play different instruments with different fretboard widths and different scales, and they just jump right in. We really enjoyed them. A lot of folks bring instruments for this. Jim Brown of Jet City Guitar, Bill Clements of Rosewood Guitar, Phil Lau brings his guitar, Perry brings guitars every year, Chuck Egner, Rob Bell. Eric brought some cool Regals that we're going to try. Joe Vinicow, Archtop.com brings instruments every year. We couldn't do this with all these guys. Martin Stillion brought the stand-up bass and some other cool old things. Dusty Strings sent a 44 D28 that's coming up later. Bill and Cindy brought this nice old Kalamazoo Mando as well. So a lot of folks really work hard. If I missed anybody, thanks again for putting all the effort in to get all this on stage and tuned up for everybody. Our next set coming up here, we have a 34 D18 and a 34 D28. So these are really early for the dreadnought steins, 14 fret. And then we have the two, a 0018 and a 0028, what they called mudbursts. There's only about a dozen of these made. Martin was experimenting with, Gibson did a lot of the sunburst, dark finish on things, and Martin kind of experimented with what to do. Didn't do that many so-called dark tops, but these pretty dark ones, they did a run of those in 34. So we're really lucky to have these two mudbursts on stage with us today. Those are both short scale, and then the 18 and the 28 are regular 14 fret D size. How lucky are we to get to hear these things today?
Do you ever go wine tasting and never spit out the wine? That's what this feels like right now.
Let's give a hand to Mark Demaray for sharing his knowledge and putting this together every year. Mark, thanks a lot.
We also want to thank the members of the U.S. Navy Band and the Army and the Marine bands that came on Monday to start tuning all these instruments.
Thank you for your service.
All right, we're going to play. This is an incredible D18, by the way. Play the Wildwood Flower.
The early Martins in this range, when they first came out, the Martins celebrated the 100th anniversary of its Dreadnought back in 2016, and 1916 is their first design, but it was different than what we know of today. The first Ds of this style that we know of were in the early 30s, 31, 32. I think Gene Autry's D45 is a 1932. I think it's a 12 fret. And so they have, there's a lot of design features in Martin that could kind of change over the years. One of them is Martin was one of the first to have the so-called X bracing. If you look at the underside of the top, the bracing that holds the top, there's a lot of tension on those strings and just pull the top apart. So they have to put all this bracing in there. And Martin had this X bracing, and where that X was placed made a difference in the sound. Also, this up here is what they call the popsicle brace commonly. That was not in some of the early ones, and this X bracing was shifted up to about an inch from the sound hole, and so we call that a forward X commonly. And that's what we're still into here. Next ones are going to be 1936 range. There's a 36 D18, two of them. Washburn model 5256 from 1935-36 that's mahogany sides and back. It's like a deep body OM. We're going to play that one. And then we have before the Lore era, the top of the line for Gibson for mandolins was an F2 and an F4. It's a round hole, and we have a 1917 F2 that fills in that gap. And we don't have enough time to play everything, but I wanted to show what an F2 looks like. This was the forerunner of the F5 that has the scroll holes and stuff. But to keep with our 35 and 36 timeline, we're going to have Tim played an unusual Gibson. When the mandolin craze died off in the mid to late 20s, Gibson had a lot of mandolin bodies left in the attic that they didn't finish. They had necks from the F2s and the F4s left over as well. And rather than spend another 10 cents making a new neck with a new wood, they put the F12 necks on the F5 bodies and used the same scale, and they said, well, let's call it something else. Let's call it the F7. So that's what this one is. Bill Monroe's first recordings with his brother Charlie, Bill was playing an F7 mandolin, just like this one. So if you see what Tim's holding there, normally the bridge goes where those little points are. With a longer scale, they had to set the bridge back, so it's no longer in really the sweet spot. So they didn't sound as good as they should. They only made them for a few years in the mid-30s. And then we'll try one a little bit later where someone has taken the neck off and put in a true F5 neck in. It's what we call a poor man's lore, because it's really, they sound just like they should at that point. But this one was 1935 F7 Gibson. And then, did you get a guitar there?
May I please have a guitar?
Didn't mean to leave you out, Eli. So Eli's got a 36. Nina's playing the 1936 Washburn. And then Chris and Eli have the 1936 D18s. Is that getting close, Tim? So, kind of mid to late 30s.
That's not going to move. Bury Me Beneath the Willow.
Yeah.
That's a Monroe Brothers song. doo-dah.
I've always wanted to have a guitar tech, just bring me guitars and
Yeah, it's pretty
not
nice.
have to carry anything but a tuner.
I say Jeeves.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or guitar tech to bring these guitars.
Yeah.
That'd be even better.
Even better. Okay, we're gonna shift ahead of, Tim's gonna play an F7 that has the F5 neck in it, so that's kind of an F7/5. And so it's the same mandolin he just played, but now someone modified it, and Randy Wood actually, to put an F5 neck on it and graduate the tone bars and the top to kind of lore specs, so kind of what we call a poor man's lore. Our rest of our artists are gonna play arch tops today.
Killer.
I'm being a princess.
So we're doing the 1925 L5 that Eli has. Nina has a 1943 Epiphone Emperor, and Critter has a 1935 Bacon and Day Knee Plus Ultra. The archtop guitars were, started to play jazz music and other styles of music, big band stuff, really into the 30s and 40s, as they experiment with different styles and sizes and sounds. So you'll get a pretty good sampling of the pretty good arch tops here with these guitars. Again, the Epiphone is 1943. Is that right, Craig? 1943? Yeah, 43. Okay. In 1925, so just post-lore for the L5, and then the Bacon and Day, 1935. Bacon and Day was a banjo company that started going out of business. Not selling many units. Keep hitting this off. Not selling many units because the banjo craze was dying off. So they had Regal in Chicago make a lot of guitars for them, some flat tops, which we'll play in a little bit. But this one, really the high-end woods, high-end craftsmanship and materials went into all of the Bacon and Day guitars. If you look at the headstock on that one, it's got all these little rhinestones and engraving and stuff. They really worked hard to transfer what they had done to their banjos over to the guitars. So arch tops.
Where do you do it? Oh, Little Georgia Rose, is that what you're saying? Yeah. I guess A. Let's do a key of A. That's 3 sharps.
Which ones?
It's early for this Bill Monroe song, but this is a great mandolin. Whatever is F6 hybrid. Electronically charged.
Sweetheart of the mountains, she's my little Georgia Rose. mountains, way down where the tall pines grow, lives my sweetheart of the mountains. She's my little Georgia Rose. Songs together, and I watched her do her little part, and she would smile when I would tell her that she was my sweetheart. Way down in the Blue Ridge Mountains, way down where the tall pines grow, lives my sweetheart.
Lock the doors. Just kidding.
Y'all, I'm just saying.
Okay, next we're going to do, it's really hard to appreciate the role that Chicago-made instruments had in the creation of our music. In the 30s, they had, Chicago was really the center of catalog sales and manufacturing for many, many brands. 3 or 4 instrument makers, Regal, Kay, Harmony, a lot of them were there. And Gibson wasn't too far away from that up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And of course, the catalog sales was the internet of its day, where that's where you just ordered it out of the catalog and they would deliver it to you. Not everybody could afford the Gibsons and Martins that we love and hear up here. So we're going to show some of the Chicago instruments now that were catalog guitars. Still really high quality materials, great sounding instruments, but something you don't see quite as often around. There's still a lot of them around. And many of them are very, very high quality and great sounding, so hopefully we'll get to see that today. Tim has a Regal mandolin that they call a reverse scroll. A guy named Cordick, Mr. Cordick, filed a patent on this in 1912. They were trying to do an inexpensive way to make something that kind of looked like a scroll Gibson. You can tell that they're a little different. But it's really nice shape one. It sounds pretty good, and I wanted to at least have you guys see it and try it. So if anybody can make it sound good, it will be Tim. Eli has a 1937 Washburn Solo Model 5246. Rosewood sides and back, made by Regal with a Washburn brand on it. The Washburn brand was owned by a company called Tonk Brothers. Tonk Brothers was the wholesale distributor in Chicago. Then they had a catalog they would sell to music dealers all over the country. So it's really Washburn's answer to a D28 from 1937. Nina has a 1937 or 8 Regal Model 530. That one's a 12 fret. The one that Eli has is a 14 fret. Really nice red spruce sides and our top on that one, a great sounding guitar. And then Critter has 1937 Regal branded. Now the same body as the one Eli's playing, made in the same factory, but Critter's is a 12 fret. So the same scale length, but that shifts the bridge down farther into the belly. And it's a pretty huge open guitar. We were playing this one last night with some 36 and 37 Martins, and it kind of held its own there. So pretty
This thing
cool.
is insane.
It's a pretty cool guitar.
This is a
yeah.
great guitar. Hey, are there any other differences beyond just the scale length and scale placement between, you know,
Same
basically
scale
you have
length.
a Regal versus a Washburn?
No, it depends on, a little bit. It depends on what the bracing was inside, varied a little bit over the years.
Right, but
but
it wasn't
the-
like brand specific, or it wasn't
No.
label specific. It was just they built the
They would
guitars
even
and
grab
slapped
a
it on.
body and put different size neck, square neck, round neck, 12 fret, 14 fret, and use the same body and kind of shift it around.
Cool.
So you have to look inside, and usually they need a little bit of work done to it, but they can come out pretty nice, you know, and they don't end up costing as much as your house, which many of the Martins up on stage do. So they're pretty cool guitars to try. So let's see what these guys can do with the Chicago catalog instruments.
Play like Lonesome Moonlight Waltz or
That'd be
something
good.
like that.
That'd be awesome.
Some kind of minor tune thing. Sorry.
Oahu. Oahu from Cleveland. It's like Ohio Phillips. Kalamazoo's right up here.
So in the 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco, they had, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a World's Fair, but all these exhibits and musical groups and stuff came together, and there's a group from Hawaii that started a Hawaiian music craze that really lasted into the 30s. If you were taking guitar lessons really in the 20s and 30s, it was just as likely you learned Hawaiian lap style as to play what we call Spanish style as we see today. And there was a company called the Oahu Music Company that was really specialized in Hawaiian music. They also sold guitars that they branded as their own, but they didn't make them. They were made by the K Guitar Company in Chicago or by Regal. They had some really cheap plywood type ones, which you see, but they also made some pretty high-end ones. The one that Tim has is a 1935 Oahu model 68K Jumbo Deluxe, it's called, or Jumbo actually. They used, instead of a lot of the fancy inlay, they did these gold appliques there to like a decal kind of thing. This one is basically an exact copy of what we know today as a Gibson Nick Lucas. It's a deep-bodied, Gibson made the L00 that's pretty common out there, but the Nick Lucas was that guitar with a dreadnought-style depth, and that's what this one is as a copy. Maple sides and back, red spruce top. Nina has the Jumbo Deluxe Oahu, which they billed as the best guitar in the world. It cost the same as a Martin D45. This one was, I got it from a guy in Scappoose, Oregon, that his great aunt Hattie had it, and it was under the bed all those years in the original case. But it's got all kinds of pearl inlay and a Tree of Life pearl inlay on the fretboard. There was a guy, when we were trying to track some of the research and history on these guitars, we tried to learn by the inlay styles what factory it was from, and it turned out there was a guy named Joe Fettiplace that Bob Carlin, banjo player for John Hartford, a great guy, did a research and wrote a book and found Joe Fettiplace. Joe was working at Regal in the 20s, got laid off in the Depression, and opened a pearl inlay shop in his little apartment in Chicago, and he sold to all the Chicago manufacturers. So almost everybody in Chicago that made guitars with any kind of pearl inlay, it was done by Joe. The headstock on the one that Critter has and the Oahu, all that fancy inlay, that was all cut by Joe in his little apartment. And he made more money than the supervisors that laid him off, which he was really thrilled to point out to them. Chris has a 1938 Washburn Solo Deluxe. It was their answer to kind of the high-end model with the pearl block inlays and fancy inlay on the top. You played that one before when you were here 10 years ago or something, yeah. And then Gibson really sold most of the units and much of their money from their kind of budget brands. One of those brands was called the Kalamazoo. That was the city they were in, of course, Kalamazoo, Michigan. And so they branded a lot of their instruments Kalamazoo. This is a Kalamazoo KM22. Is that right? KM22, I think, yeah. So it was really a lot of the same features as their brands, but they left maybe some little feature out, and they sold it for much less money out of the catalogs. The number one customer of Gibson in those days was Montgomery Ward. They sold it out of their catalogs, and those were usually branded as a Recording King. But this one was Gibson's own budget brand called the Kalamazoo. So we're going to hear again. Oahu was a great company that you can do some research on. A guy named Harry Stanley started it and run it. He patented the tuners that came with the guitars and everything. Quite a guy and quite a story. They sold a lot of sheet music and stuff for Hawaiian. So
I have a little Kalamazoo KG11, the ladder brace, and that, if I had to give up all my guitars, that's the one I would keep. It's kind of what those new Waterloos are based on, maybe.
How about I'm a Pilgrim?
Nice.
In E, is that right?
stranger traveling through this wearisome land. I've got a home in that yonder city, good Lord, and it's not made by hand. I've got a mother, a sister, and a brother who have gone on before. I'm determined to go and see them, good Lord, over on that other shore. Going down to that river of Jordan just to bathe my weary soul. If I could but touch the hem of his garment, good Lord, I know, Lord, I know it would make me whole. Everybody. Wearisome land. I got a home in that yonder city, good Lord. It's not, Lord, it's not made by hand. But these guitars are.
This is a Hoff that's got a big, real high action. That's awesome. Really get it. That's insane. This good high action to play bass on.
Oh, it's in that little hockey case somewhere. Yeah, no, keep going back past it. That's the one. I know. Yeah, pass it around.
You have to put Critter in the recovery room after this.
I know.
He'll lie down. That one will lose. All right.
Okay, now we're getting back into, really, these are some of the best guitars we have on stage. We're going to have Tim play the Lohr F5 again, Jurassic Lohr. Eli has Chris's 1937 D28, the first one made in 1937.
Yep, that's the first D28 they stamped that year.
And then Nina has, is that Marilyn or, yeah, Deacon? Marilyn has a 1938 D18 that's known as Deacon. And Chris has Chuck's 1937 D18. It wouldn't be Wintergrass if we didn't have Deacon and Chuck's 37 on stage, so it's one of the best ones in the Northwest, or at least it used to be one of the best.
Sorry, Chuck. Sorry about that, buddy.
What are
You know, actually,
say?
there's a funny story. So she hates when I tell this, so I shouldn't do it. They're cameras, but it'll be all right. So I met my now wife, some of you may know Kristen Andreasen. She played in Uncle Earl. And I first met her at, the first time I met her was at the Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival, kind of on the other side of the country. And Casey Groves, a friend of mine in Uncle Earl, asked me if they could borrow my guitar. I had a 1954 D28, Uncle Johnny. It's a great guitar. And so I said, of course, use Uncle Johnny. It's great. And so they went up on stage, and they were playing Uncle Johnny, and the song ended, and Casey said, we want to thank Chris Eldridge from the Infamous String... This is how long ago it was. It was back when I was in the String Dusters. Said, Chris Eldridge from the Infamous String Dusters for letting us borrow this beautiful 1954 D28 guitar. Like, wow, what a special instrument. And it's like, okay, cool. And then, not 15 seconds later, Kristen had the guitar, and she bumped it right into the mic. And this wasn't actually that loud, but it just rocketed. It was like the PA just went, boom! And 5,000 people just gasped like this. And I just thought, oh, she's handling that like a champ. She's kind of cute. I don't know. It's kind of cool. That's kind of the beginning of it all.
Well, my unrelated story was I got to play with Chris just briefly late night, maybe last April, and I played this guitar for a few minutes, and then I woke up in the middle of the night realizing I hadn't put it in a case, and I had left it in a kind of a precarious situation. I don't remember that, but the neck was like hanging off the things that give you anxiety in the middle of the night. Anyway, glad to know that nothing happened to it.
They're tough. They made it this far. Yeah, it'll be all right.
What, Katie Deer?
Yeah.
In E? Katie Deer? can be a bride of mine. If he says yes, come back and tell me. He says no, run away. Oh, Willie dear, no use in asking. He's in his room, taking rest, and by his side is a silver dagger. Slay the one that I love best. gets sad. So he picked up that silver dagger and stove it through his jealous heart, saying goodbye, Katie, goodbye, dark. The time has come for us to part. And she picked up that bloody weapon and stove it through her lily white dress, saying goodbye, Mama, goodbye, Pop. I'll die with the one that I love best.
That's how it sounded back in the old days, for a second there.
This is what I was doing.
For just a second, you heard them how like they sounded in the old days. Sure. That's another lure. 2 lures, 1 day, no waiting.
So this will be getting close to our last song. We're running out of time here. We just didn't get to everything today. We brought a lot of stuff to try, but it's always too much fun, and we love these guys to get to play. Thanks again to our artists for coming up with us. Tim O'Brien, Eli West, Nina Gerber, Chris Eldridge.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, Bill, and Jim, and everyone else. I try to invite myself over to these guys' houses all the time. Yeah.
So, when the war came along, World War II, the government restricted the use of metal parts in just about everything that was made to help with the war effort. And that included guitars. So you'll see the one that Eli has and the one that I think Nina has, they have white plastic buttons. You can tell the wartime Martins because of that, unless people have replaced the tuners. Those are both from 1944. Martin, when they put the neck together, that string tension kind of bends that wood, so they put some kind of reinforcing in there. And they, in the earlier days, they used steel T-bar, a half-inch, it looked like a piece of T made out of steel. And then the war, they couldn't use that, so they used a piece of ebony in there, ebony wood, which they had used earlier in the 30s and in the 20s. The one that Nina has, for some reason, came with a T-bar. And the one that Eli has the ebony neck. Thanks to Dusty Strings for bringing this one out too, by the way. They have it for sale at their shop and brought it over for us to try so we'd have a pair of wartime 44s. The one that Chris has is 1946, the last year of herringbone. You hear the word herringbone referring to Martin D28s because it was the little wood trim around the outside looked like a herringbone fish bone. They ran out of that because it was made in Germany, and Germany was a little rough shape after the war in 46. They didn't have any more to do it, so they replaced it with just a plastic binding around there from late 46 and 47 on. Otherwise, the similar guitars. But in 44, they still had red spruce in stock, and that's mostly what the guitars were made of. That's what Mr. Martin preferred. He liked the color and the grain of it better. But they ran out of that. They bought from a place called Eaton Lumber, which was in Vermont. They logged it off, and wasn't any left for them to buy. So they started buying from a company out here in Washington State in Hoquiam called Posey Lumber, and they supplied the spruce for a lot of things. Actually, the wing spar for the Spirit of St. Louis that Charles Lindbergh flew the Atlantic was from Posey Lumber, made out of Sitka spruce, nice clear stuff. So the first year of Sitka, instead of red spruce, was 46. In addition to that, the bracing prior to 44, they had this scallop or swooping in here because it helped the top vibrate more, but they started having warranty issues. Martins were warranted for life. So if your guitar broke, they would have to fix it for you. So they started going with a more straight bracing. If you can look at this later up front if you want, but they stopped the scalloping in 45 and 46. They still had a nice taper to them, but the sound is a little different with a Sitka top and the straight bracing as opposed to the scallop. So 44 was the last year of scallop bracing and red spruce top by and large. So that's what we're trying today. So you can compare the difference between a post-war 46, 2 wartime 44s, and then Tim has the Dewey F5 floor, because why wouldn't you? And we'll hear these guys playing.
Can do Sweet Georgia Brown? Cool. You play all the keys, all 5 keys. Is that, what is it, 1, 2, 1, 6, 2, 5? Oh, all 4 keys. F is okay?
tender, sweet Georgia brown.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. We didn't get to everything today. We always run out of time for this, but Wintergrass lets us do a vintage instrument museum up in the Cedar Ballroom from 2 to 4 today. So if you didn't get enough now, come on up there and take a look. You can look at them up close and personal. If you guys didn't get enough, you're welcome to come up there and play them for us as well. Thanks so much to our artists, the great Tim O'Brien, one of my favorites, Eli West, Nina Gerber, and Chris Eldridge. Sharon Gilchrist.
Mark Demaray.
Sharon Gilchrist was supposed to come today. She got the flu, and Chris was kind enough to step in for her, so we thank him for flexible schedules. It's all about Wintergrass and the music. Thanks for coming. Consider donating to Wintergrass again, too, and thanks so much for coming today. We really appreciate you guys coming out. And thanks to Jason, the Fretboard Journal. Jason films it. He should, if you want to see this again, you can watch it on the Fretboard Journal's website coming up. If you don't subscribe to the Fretboard Journal, you should really think about it. Almost all of these guys have been in the Fretboard Journal. Nina's in the most recent issue. Tim's been in it a number of times. It's a great magazine. Right over there in Ballard, homegrown folks. Take a look at their website, Fretboard Journal. And thanks again for coming.